Caleb, please, you weren't supposed to find that!
Tessa, there are 23 videos. I saw everything.
My name is Caleb Morton, and I'm an architect. I build things, design them, plan them down to the last nail and wire. What I never planned for was finding out my wife had been starring in her own private theater production right in our bedroom. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. It started on a Tuesday night in October. The floorboard near Tessa's side of the bed had been creaking for weeks, driving me insane with that persistent squeak every time she got up for her midnight bathroom runs. Being the fix-it type, I decided to crawl under there with my toolbox after she left for her evening shift at Portland General Hospital. Tessa worked in medical billing, supposedly pulling late hours to catch up on insurance claims. At least, that's what she'd been telling me for the past 6 months. Funny how dedicated she'd become to her job lately. I was tightening the loose screws when my flashlight caught something wedged between the floor joists. A small flash drive, the cheap kind you can buy at any drugstore. It had fallen through a gap in the floorboards, probably from Tessa's nightstand drawer above. The label read, "Best Melodramas," in Tessa's neat handwriting. I almost laughed. My wife's taste in entertainment had always been questionable. She loved those overwrought soap operas and tearjerker movies that made me want to throw things at the TV. I figured this was her secret stash of the really bad stuff she was too embarrassed to watch when I was around. Curiosity got the better of me. I plugged the drive into my laptop, expecting to find a collection of cheesy romance films or maybe some guilty pleasure TV shows. What I found instead made me freeze. 23 video files, all time-stamped, all featuring my wife of 12 years in our marital bed with Grant Ellery, her married coworker from the hospital's IT department. The timestamps showed they'd been using our house, our bed, for their afternoon entertainment while I was at work designing dream homes for other people. The most recent file was dated just 3 days ago. I sat there in the blue glow of my laptop screen, watching my marriage disintegrate in high-definition clarity. Tessa, who complained she was too tired for intimacy with me, certainly seemed energetic enough for Grant. The same woman who claimed her back hurt too much for certain positions was remarkably flexible when it came to her office romance. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent years creating detailed blueprints for other people's perfect lives, while my own was being systematically demolished behind my back. Grant Ellery. I knew him from hospital holiday parties and the occasional double date. Tall, prematurely gray at 41, with that smug smile of someone who thought he was smarter than everyone else in the room. He drove a white Tesla and wore expensive suits that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. His wife Becca was quiet, intelligent, and apparently as clueless about her husband's extracurricular activities as I had been about my wife's. I copied the entire contents of the flash drive to my computer, then to a backup drive, then to cloud storage. 12 years of marriage had taught me that Tessa was thorough when she wanted to hide something. If she realized this evidence existed, it would disappear faster than free donuts in a construction trailer. The next morning, I called in sick to work. Tessa had already left for her day shift, kissing me goodbye with the same lips that had been all over Grant Ellery 48 hours earlier. I spent the day planning. See, the thing about being an architect is that you learn to think systematically. You start with a foundation, build up the structure piece by piece, and make sure everything is solid before you add the finishing touches. You also learn that the most spectacular demolitions require careful planning. By evening, I had my blueprint ready. "Honey," I called to Tessa as she walked through the door, looking tired and slightly disheveled from what she claimed was a difficult day dealing with insurance companies. "I was thinking we should have Grant and Becca over for dinner this weekend. It's been too long since we've socialized with your work friends." Tessa's face went pale for just a moment before she recovered her composure. "Oh, that's sweet of you, Caleb, but they're probably busy. You know how it is." "Nonsense. I already texted Grant. He seemed very excited about the idea. Said he has something important to discuss with us anyway." That last part was a lie, but the look of pure panic that flashed across Tessa's face told me everything I needed to know. She was trapped, and she knew it. "I'll make that roast you love," I continued, as if I hadn't noticed her distress. "The one with the special sauce. It's going to be a night to remember." The next few days passed in a strange, suspended reality. Tessa went about her normal routine: morning coffee, complaints about difficult patients and insurance paperwork, evening shifts that ran late. But I could see the cracks forming. She checked her phone obsessively, deleted text messages before reading them in front of me, and jumped every time I walked into a room unexpectedly. I, meanwhile, had become a student of surveillance. Thursday evening, I drove to Portland General and parked in the visitor section of the parking garage. From there, I had a clear view of the employee entrance and the section where Tessa usually parked her silver Honda Civic. At 6:47 p.m., Grant's white Tesla pulled into the space next to Tessa's car. He sat there for exactly 3 minutes before Tessa emerged from the building. They didn't touch, didn't even appear to acknowledge each other, but the timing was too perfect to be coincidental. I followed them at a distance as they drove in separate cars to the Riverside Motel, a rundown place on the outskirts of town that rented rooms by the hour. Grant went in first. Tessa followed 5 minutes later. They emerged an hour and 15 minutes later, again maintaining the pretense that they barely knew each other. So they'd moved their operation off-site. Smart. They probably figured our house was too risky now, though they had no idea how risky it had already become for them. Friday night, I met my best friend Colin O'Malley at Murphy's Irish pub downtown. Colin was a union electrician with hands the size of dinner plates and a moral code that was flexible when it came to helping friends in need. We'd known each other since high school, and he was one of the few people I trusted completely. "You look like hell," Colin said, sliding a beer across the scarred wooden table. "What's eating you?" I told him everything, about the flash drive, the videos, the motel surveillance. Colin listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. "Jesus, Caleb, I'm sorry, that's rough." He took a long pull of his beer. "So what's the plan? Please tell me you have a plan. I'm working on it, but I need your help with something." "Name it." "Can you set up some cameras in my living room? Hidden ones. I want everything recorded tomorrow night." Colin grinned, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Now you're talking my language. I've got some equipment left over from a security job last month. Wireless, high-def, motion-activated. They'll never know they're being filmed." "Perfect. And Colin? This stays between us." "Goes without saying, brother. Goes without saying." Saturday morning, while Tessa was at the grocery store, Colin came over with a toolbox full of electronic equipment. In less than 2 hours, he had 3 cameras positioned around our living room and dining area, all connected to a receiver hidden in my home office. "You'll have multiple angles," Colin explained, showing me the monitoring software on my computer. "Audio's crystal clear, too. Whatever happens tonight, you'll have it all on record." "Thanks, man. I owe you." "You don't owe me anything. Just promise me you'll let me know if you need backup. I don't like the sound of this Grant character." After Colin left, I spent the afternoon preparing dinner. Tessa's favorite pot roast, roasted vegetables, even a bottle of the expensive wine we'd been saving for a special occasion. If this wasn't special, I didn't know what was. Tessa was nervous all day, finding excuses to stay busy. She cleaned the house twice, reorganized the linen closet, and changed her outfit 3 times before settling on a conservative blue dress that made her look like she was attending a funeral. Maybe she was. At exactly 6 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Grant and Becca Ellery standing on our front porch, both looking uncomfortable. Grant wore his usual expensive suit, but his confident smile seemed forced. Becca looked tired, older than her 38 years, with the kind of exhaustion that comes from carrying secrets you don't want to know. "Caleb, great to see you," Grant said, extending his hand with that practiced charm that probably worked well in IT meetings. "Thanks for having us over." "Wouldn't miss it for the world," I replied, shaking his hand and noting how sweaty his palm was. Come in. Tessa's just finishing up in the kitchen." Becca handed me a bottle of wine. "I hope White's okay. I wasn't sure what we were having." "Perfect choice. Please, make yourselves comfortable." I led them into the living room, where Tessa was arranging appetizers on the coffee table. She looked up as we entered, and I watched her face carefully as she made eye contact with Grant. There it was, that split-second flash of intimacy, the kind of look that passes between lovers who are trying to hide their connection. "Hi, Grant. Becca. So glad you could make it," Tessa said, her voice pitched slightly higher than normal. "Thanks for having us," Becca replied. "Your house always looks so beautiful." We made small talk over drinks and appetizers. Grant dominated the conversation, as usual, regaling us with stories about hospital politics and his latest technology initiatives. Tessa laughed at his jokes a little too loudly, while Becca sat quietly, occasionally glancing at her husband with an expression I couldn't quite read. I played the perfect host, refilling drinks and steering the conversation towards safe topics. But inside, I was counting down the minutes until the main event. Dinner was excellent, if I do say so myself. The conversation flowed more naturally as the wine loosened everyone's tongues. Grant became more animated, gesturing broadly as he told stories. Tessa relaxed enough to stop checking her phone every 5 minutes. Even Becca seemed to be enjoying herself, asking me about my latest architectural projects. Caleb designed the most beautiful house last year, Tessa said, reaching over to squeeze my hand. The gesture felt like a betrayal all by itself. It was featured in Main Home and Design magazine. That's impressive, Becca said. I'd love to see it sometime. I'll show you the photos after dinner, I promised. But first, I thought we could have a little entertainment. Movie night, if you're interested. Grant's fork paused halfway to his mouth. Movie night? Tessa's been collecting some interesting films lately, haven't you, honey? I looked directly at my wife, whose face had gone completely white. I found her flash drive the other day, some real melodramas on there, Academy Award-worthy performances. The silence that followed was deafening. Tessa's hand trembled as she reached for her wine glass. Grant had stopped eating entirely, his eyes darting between Tessa and me like a trapped animal looking for an escape route. I don't think... Tessa started to say. Oh, I insist, I interrupted, standing up and walking to the entertainment center. You're going to love this, Grant. Really, it's got everything. Drama, passion, betrayal, and the lead actress is someone you know very well. I slipped the flash drive into the media player and picked up the remote control. Behind me, I could hear Tessa's chair scraping against the floor as she stood up. Caleb, please. Sit down, Tessa. My voice was calm, but there was steel underneath it. Everyone sit down. The show's about to begin. I hit play, and our 65-inch television filled with crystal-clear footage of our bedroom. The timestamp in the corner read 3 days ago, 2:17 p.m. Tessa and Grant were already in frame, and there was no mistaking what they were doing or where they were doing it. The sound of Grant's wineglass hitting the hardwood floor was like a gunshot in the sudden silence. Jesus Christ, he whispered, his face draining of all color. Tessa made a sound somewhere between a sob and a gasp. Turn it off. Please, Caleb, turn it off. But we're just getting to the good part, I said, settling back into my chair with my wine. Look at that camera work. Really captures the emotion of the scene. Becca hadn't moved. She sat perfectly still, staring at the screen with an expression of complete calm. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady. How long has this been going on? Based on the timestamps, about 6 months, I replied, pausing the video on a particularly intimate moment. 23 separate performances, all in our marital bed. They really committed to the role. Grant finally found his voice. Caleb, listen. This isn't what it looks like. I started laughing. Actually laughing because the absurdity of the statement was too much to bear. Really, Grant, because it looks like you're screwing my wife in the bed I sleep in every night. Are you telling me that's not what's happening here? It happened. We didn't plan it. It was a mistake. 23 mistakes, I corrected. I'm impressed by your consistency. Most people learn from their mistakes, but you two really committed to repeating yours. Tessa was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks in black streaks. Caleb, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It didn't mean anything. Oh, but it did mean something, I said, standing up and walking to the window. It meant that every time you told me you were too tired for intimacy, you were saving your energy for Grant. It meant that every time you worked late, you were actually working on your relationship with him. It meant that every morning when you kissed me goodbye, you were thinking about the next time you'd see your lover. I turned back to face them. It meant that my marriage has been a lie for 6 months. Grant had recovered some of his composure and was trying to salvage the situation. Look, we can work this out. We're all adults here. People make mistakes. We, I interrupted. There is no we anymore, Grant. There's you and Tessa, who betrayed your spouses. There's Becca and me, who were betrayed. And there's a whole lot of evidence that's going to make your lives very interesting in the coming weeks. What do you mean? Tessa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I mean, I've made copies. Lots of copies. And I've done some research on hospital employment policies regarding fraternization and ethics violations. Turns out having an affair with a coworker while falsifying timesheets is grounds for immediate termination. Grant's face went from white to green. You wouldn't. Try me. Becca finally stood up, smoothing down her dress with deliberate care. Grant, we're leaving. Now. Becca, honey, let me explain. Explain what? That you've been cheating on me for 6 months? That you've been lying to my face every day? Her voice was still calm, but there was ice underneath it. That you've humiliated me in front of our friends? It's not like that. It's exactly like that. She turned to me. Caleb, thank you for dinner, and thank you for showing me who my husband really is. She walked toward the door, leaving Grant scrambling to follow her. Becca, wait. We need to talk about this. At the doorway, she turned back. No, Grant. We need to talk to lawyers about this. After they left, Tessa and I sat in silence for several minutes. She'd stopped crying, but her hands were still shaking. "What happens now?" she finally asked. "Now? Now you pack a bag and find somewhere else to stay tonight. Tomorrow we start discussing divorce terms." "Caleb, please. Can't we try to work through this? I made a mistake." 23 mistakes, I corrected again. "And the only mistake here was mine, for trusting you." She stood up unsteadily. "Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't know. Maybe Grant's couch is available, or perhaps that motel you two have been frequenting. I hear they have weekly rates." The look of shock on her face told me she hadn't realized I knew about the motel. "You followed us?" "I investigated. There's a difference. An architect always surveys the site before beginning demolition." Tessa went upstairs to pack, and I sat alone in our living room, surrounded by the debris of our dinner party and our marriage. The TV was still paused on that incriminating image, a frozen moment of betrayal that had changed everything. My phone buzzed, a text from Colin. "How did it go?" I typed back, "Demolition complete, beginning reconstruction tomorrow." Within an hour, Tessa was gone, leaving behind only a forwarding address and a promise that her lawyer would be in touch. I poured myself another glass of wine and began planning the next phase of my blueprint. The foundation had been laid. Now it was time to build something new. Monday morning arrived gray and drizzling, typical October weather in Maine. I called in sick again, which raised some eyebrows at the firm since I hadn't taken a sick day in over 2 years. But I had important work to do, and it couldn't wait. First stop, Portland General Hospital. I'd done my homework over the weekend. The hospital's employee handbook was available online, and it made for fascinating reading. Section 4.7 dealt specifically with workplace relationships and conflicts of interest. Section 8.3 covered time card fraud and falsification of records. Section 12.1 outlined the disciplinary process for ethics violations. Grant and Tessa had violated all 3 sections. I'd also done some digging into their schedules. Hospital employees were required to badge in and out, creating an electronic record of their work hours. I'd cross-referenced those records with the timestamps on the videos, and the pattern was damning. Every single one of their afternoon encounters had occurred during hours when they were supposedly on the clock. The HR director, Margaret Lytle, was a stern woman in her 50s who'd built her reputation on maintaining strict professional standards. She agreed to see me during her lunch break, probably expecting a routine complaint about billing or insurance. "Mr. Morton," she said, gesturing for me to take a seat in her sterile office. "What can I do for you today?" "I need to report an ethics violation involving 2 of your employees," I said, placing a manila envelope on her desk. "Tessa Morton and Grant Ellery." Her expression sharpened. "What kind of violation?" "Workplace fraternization, time card fraud, and misuse of hospital resources." I opened the envelope and removed a printed summary I'd prepared, along with selected screenshots from the videos. "This documentation shows a pattern of behavior spanning 6 months. Margaret put on her reading glasses and examined the materials. Her face remained professionally neutral, but I could see her jaw tightening as she processed the information. "These timestamps," she said after several minutes, "these indicate the alleged incidents occurred during scheduled work hours." "That's correct. I have additional evidence if needed, including video documentation." She looked up sharply. "Video documentation?" "Obtained legally from my own property," I clarified. "My wife and Mr. Ellery were using our home for their meetings." Margaret set down the papers and folded her hands. "Mr. Morton, I appreciate you bringing this to our attention. However, I should warn you that filing a false complaint is a serious matter." "I understand. That's why I've been very careful to document everything thoroughly." I handed her a second envelope. "Badge records for both employees over the past 6 months, cross-referenced with the timestamps. I think you'll find the correlation interesting." She opened the second envelope and spread the papers across her desk. As she studied them, her expression grew increasingly grim. "I'll need to investigate this further," she said finally. "But based on what I'm seeing here, we'll be scheduling disciplinary meetings for both employees. Are you prepared to testify if necessary?" "Absolutely." "And this video evidence you mentioned?" "Available upon request through proper legal channels." Margaret nodded and made some notes in a file. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Morton. Thank you for bringing this matter to our attention." I left the hospital feeling like I'd just lit the fuse on a very large bomb. Next stop, Grant's apartment complex. Grant lived in Harbor View condominiums, an upscale development overlooking Casco Bay. His white Tesla was parked in its assigned spot, gleaming despite the overcast sky. I parked across the street and called Colin. "You busy tonight?" I asked when he answered. "Depends." What did you have in mind? Remember that art project we talked about? I think it's time to get creative. Colin chuckled. I'll bring the supplies. What time? Midnight. And Colin? Wear clothes you don't mind throwing away afterward. That evening, I had dinner at Murphy's pub, making sure several people saw me there. I chatted with the bartender, watched a Patriots game, and generally established my alibi. At 11:30, I paid my tab and drove home, where Colin was waiting in my driveway. Ready for some late-night redecorating? He asked, pulling a duffel bag from his truck. What did you bring? Washable paint, biodegradable packing peanuts, and a few other artistic touches. Nothing permanent, nothing that can't be cleaned up, but definitely memorable. We drove to Grant's complex in Colin's truck, parking in the visitor section. The security was minimal, just some poorly positioned cameras that were easy to avoid if you knew what you were doing. Grant's Tesla sat alone under a streetlight, perfect for our purposes. Colin worked with the efficiency of someone who'd done similar projects before. Within minutes, Grant's pristine white car was decorated with washable red paint spelling out cheater across the windshield and home wrecker along the driver's side. We filled the interior with biodegradable packing peanuts through the slightly open sunroof, and Colin used a valve tool to let the air out of all 4 tires. The final touch was a flash drive taped to the driver's side window, labeled Best Melodramas, Director's Cut. Think he'll get the message? Colin asked as we surveyed our handiwork. If he doesn't, we'll have to try interpretive dance next time. We were back at my house by 1:15 a.m., and Colin was on his way home by 1:30. I went to bed feeling more satisfied than I had in months. Tuesday morning, my phone rang at 7:45 a.m. You snake! Grant's voice was shaking with rage. I know it was you. Good morning, Grant. You sound upset. Rough night? You vandalized my car. That's destruction of property. I'm calling the police. Really? That's interesting. What makes you think I had anything to do with it? Don't play dumb with me, Caleb. Nobody else would... Would what? Object to you sleeping with their wife? I think you might be surprised how many people would have a problem with that. There was silence on the other end of the line. Besides, I continued, I was at Murphy's pub until almost midnight. Lots of witnesses. Then I went home and went to bed. Maybe you should look into better security for your building. This isn't over, Grant said. You're right about that. It's just getting started. I hung up and poured myself a cup of coffee. Outside, it was starting to rain again, but for the first time in months, I felt like the sun was shining. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. This is Becca Ellery. Can we meet? I have something to show you. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. When and where? Her response came immediately. Coffee shop on Exchange Street. 1 hour. Come alone. This was an interesting development. I finished my coffee, got dressed, and headed downtown to see what Grant's soon-to-be ex-wife had to say. The coffee shop on Exchange Street was one of those trendy places with exposed brick walls and baristas who took their craft very seriously. I found Becca sitting in a corner booth, nursing a large coffee and staring out the rain-streaked window. She looked like she hadn't slept much. Thank you for coming, she said, as I slid into the seat across from her. Thank you for reaching out. I wasn't sure I'd hear from you again after Saturday night. She managed a weak smile. Saturday night was educational, but I think you'll find what I have to show you even more interesting. Becca reached into her purse and pulled out a tablet, setting it on the table between us. I've been doing some investigating of my own. Turns out I'm not as naive as everyone thinks. She tapped the screen, and I found myself looking at what appeared to be financial records, bank statements, credit card bills, hotel receipts. I've been tracking Grant's spending for the past year, she explained. At first, it was just because our credit card bills seemed high. But then I started noticing patterns. She scrolled through the documents, highlighting specific entries. Motel charges, restaurant bills for 2 people when he claimed to be working late, even jewelry purchases that I never received. How long have you known? Suspected? About 3 months. Knew for certain? Saturday night, thanks to your little movie screening. She took a sip of her coffee. But here's the interesting part. I don't think Tessa was his first affair. That got my attention. What do you mean? Look at this. She showed me a series of hotel charges from earlier in the year. Different locations, different patterns, but same behavior. I think there was someone else before Tessa. Do you know who? I have suspicions. A nurse named Jennifer who left the hospital suddenly last spring. She and Grant were on the same committee for the new computer system implementation. I studied the financial records, noting the dates and amounts. Grant had been busy. Why are you showing me this? I asked. Becca's expression hardened. Because I want him to lose everything. His job, his reputation, his sense of security. I want him to feel as humiliated and betrayed as I do. And you think I can help with that? I think we can help each other. You have evidence of his current affair. I have evidence of his pattern of behavior and financial misconduct. Together, we can make sure he faces consequences for all of it. I leaned back in my chair, considering the implications. What did you have in mind? I've already filed for divorce and hired the best attorney I could afford, but I want to make sure Grant's employer knows exactly what kind of person they've been trusting with their computer systems and patient data. HR is already investigating based on the information I provided. Good, but they might be inclined to handle it quietly, maybe just a reprimand or transfer. I want to make sure they understand the full scope of his misconduct. She handed me a flash drive. Copies of everything I've found. Financial records, hotel receipts, even some emails I recovered from his laptop before he changed his passwords. Emails? Love letters to Jennifer. Very explicit ones. And some messages with Tessa that show they were planning to meet during work hours. I pocketed the flash drive. What about Tessa? Are you interested in making sure she faces consequences too? That's your department, but if you need character witnesses or additional evidence for divorce proceedings, I'm happy to help. We spent another hour going over the details of what Becca had discovered. Her investigation had been thorough and methodical, the work of someone who'd been systematically betrayed and wanted justice. There's one more thing, she said as we prepared to leave. Grant's been telling people at the hospital that you're unstable, that you've been threatening him and vandalizing his property. Has he now? He's trying to paint himself as the victim, says you're having a breakdown over the divorce and taking it out on him. I smiled. That's interesting, especially since I have video evidence of him threatening me. You do? Not yet, but I will. That afternoon, I drove to the construction site where my firm was overseeing a new residential development. It was a large project, with several houses in various stages of completion. The site was deserted, except for a security guard who knew me well enough to wave me through. I parked near the half-finished house at the far end of the development and sent Grant a text from a burner phone I'd picked up that morning. We need to talk. Meet me at the Riverside construction site on Oak Hill Road. Come alone, or everyone at the hospital sees the director's cut of your home movies. Then I waited. Grant arrived 20 minutes later, his Tesla looking somewhat cleaner than it had that morning, though I could still see traces of red paint around the edges of the windshield. He parked near the site entrance and walked cautiously toward the unfinished house where I was waiting. "Caleb," he called out, "where are you?" "Up here," I replied from the second floor of the skeletal structure. "Come on up. We need to have a conversation." Grant climbed the temporary stairs, his expensive shoes slipping slightly on the rough plywood. When he reached the second floor, I was standing near the far end, silhouetted against the gray sky visible through the unfinished roof. "What the hell is this about?" he demanded, trying to project confidence but failing to hide the nervousness in his voice. "This is about consequences, Grant. Something you don't seem to understand." "I don't know what you think you're accomplishing with these games, but—" "Games?" I interrupted. "You think this is a game? You've been screwing my wife for 6 months, lying to your own wife, stealing time from your employer, and now you think I'm playing games? Look, I know you're upset." "Upset?" I started laughing, the sound echoing strangely in the unfinished space. "Grant, upset is when someone cuts you off in traffic. Upset is when your team loses in overtime. This is rage. This is betrayal. This is the complete destruction of everything I thought I knew about my life." Grant took a step backward, suddenly aware that he was on the second floor of an unfinished building with a man who had every reason to hate him. "Caleb, let's be reasonable here. We can work something out." "The time for working something out was before you decided to use my bed as your personal playground." I moved closer, and Grant backed up another step. Now we're in damage control mode. "What do you want?" "I want you to resign from the hospital. I want you to leave town. I want you to disappear from my life and never come back. I can't just quit my job. I have responsibilities, financial obligations. You should have thought of that before you started your affair." I pulled out my phone and showed him the screen. "One button, Grant. One button, and every person in your contact list receives a very interesting video attachment." Grant's face went white. "You're insane." "Maybe. But I'm insane with evidence, which makes me dangerous." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm explaining consequences. Actions have consequences, Grant. You chose to have an affair. You chose to lie and cheat and steal. Now you get to live with the results." Grant's fear was giving way to anger. "You think you can destroy my life just because your wife doesn't love you anymore?" My wife doesn't love me. I stepped closer. Is that what you think this is about? Face it, Caleb. If Tessa was happy at home, she never would have looked elsewhere. Maybe you should ask yourself what you did wrong instead of blaming everyone else. That's when I lost it. I grabbed Grant by his expensive suit jacket and shoved him backward against one of the vertical support beams. His head hit the wood with a satisfying thunk. Let me explain something to you, I said, my face inches from his. My marriage problems are between me and Tessa. But you? You made it your business when you decided to participate. You could have walked away. You could have said no. Instead, you chose to help destroy my marriage for your own entertainment. Get your hands off me, Grant gasped, but he made no move to push me away. Or what? You'll call the police? Go ahead. I'm sure they'd love to hear about your affair with a married coworker. I'm sure the hospital board would find it fascinating reading. I released him and stepped back. Grant straightened his jacket with shaking hands. This isn't over, he said, trying to salvage some dignity. You're absolutely right. This is just the beginning. As Grant hurried toward the stairs, I called after him. Oh, and Grant, next time you want to spread rumors about me being unstable, you might want to make sure I don't have video evidence of you threatening me. I held up my phone, showing him that I'd been recording our entire conversation. The look on his face was priceless. The next morning brought news that the hospital's investigation was moving quickly. Margaret Lytle called to inform me that both Tessa and Grant had been suspended pending a full disciplinary hearing scheduled for Friday. We've reviewed the evidence you provided, along with additional information that's come to light, she said. This appears to be a serious breach of professional conduct. Additional information? Financial irregularities, misuse of hospital resources, and evidence of a pattern of inappropriate workplace relationships. We take these matters very seriously. I thanked her and hung up, then immediately called Becca. Did you send them the financial records? I asked. Yesterday afternoon, along with copies of the emails and hotel receipts. I figured they should have the complete picture. What about Grant? How's he handling the suspension? Not well. He's been making phone calls all morning, trying to find a lawyer. He keeps insisting this is all a misunderstanding that can be cleared up. Denial is a powerful thing. Yes, it is, but reality has a way of breaking through eventually. Friday morning, I put on my best suit and drove to Portland General for the disciplinary hearing. The hospital had scheduled separate meetings for Tessa and Grant, with mine first on the agenda. The conference room was sterile and intimidating, with Margaret Lytle flanked by two other administrators I didn't recognize. Tessa sat at the far end of the table with a lawyer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Mr. Morton, Margaret began, thank you for coming. We've reviewed all the evidence you've provided, and we have some questions. For the next hour, they walked me through everything. The discovery of the flash drive, the timestamps, the pattern of behavior, the financial records Becca had provided. I answered their questions calmly and thoroughly, sticking to facts and avoiding emotional outbursts. Tessa's lawyer tried to challenge the admissibility of the video evidence, but since it was recorded on my own property without any expectation of privacy, his objections fell flat. Mrs. Morton, Margaret said finally, turning to my wife, do you have anything to say in your defense? Tessa looked smaller than I'd ever seen her, hunched in her chair like a scolded child. It was a mistake, she said quietly. A terrible mistake that got out of hand. I never meant for it to go this far. According to the evidence, this mistake occurred 23 times over a 6-month period, often during scheduled work hours. Can you explain how this represents a single error in judgment? Tessa's lawyer whispered something in her ear, but she shook her head. I can't explain it. I made bad choices, and I'm sorry. I'm afraid sorry isn't sufficient in this case. Based on the evidence presented, we're terminating your employment effective immediately. Security will escort you out after this meeting. Tessa started crying, but I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no pity, just emptiness where 12 years of marriage used to be. Grant's hearing was scheduled for that afternoon. I wasn't required to attend, but I wanted to see how it played out. I waited in the parking lot until I saw him arrive, looking haggard and desperate. An hour later, he emerged from the building carrying a cardboard box. His face was flushed, and he was moving with the quick, jerky motions of someone barely holding it together. I rolled down my window as he passed my car. How did it go, Grant? He stopped and turned toward me, his eyes blazing with fury. You destroyed my life. No, I documented it. You destroyed it all by yourself. I'll sue you. I'll take everything you have. With what money? I hear unemployment benefits don't cover legal fees very well. Grant set down his box and took a step toward my car. For a moment, I thought he might actually try to attack me. Instead, he just stood there, shaking with rage and humiliation. "This isn't over," he said finally. "Actually, it is. You're fired, your wife is divorcing you, and your reputation is ruined. I'd say we're pretty much done here." Grant picked up his box and walked away without another word. I watched him drive out of the parking lot for the last time, his once pristine Tesla now a symbol of his fallen status. That evening, I met Colin at Murphy's pub to celebrate. "So it's really over?" he asked, raising his beer in a toast. "The professional consequences are handled. The personal ones will take longer." "What about Tessa? How are the divorce proceedings going?" "She's not fighting it. Her lawyer advised her to accept whatever terms I offer and be grateful I'm not pursuing additional damages." "And Grant?" "Becca's attorney is making sure he loses everything in their divorce. Apparently, adultery and financial misconduct don't play well in family court." Colin grinned. "Remind me never to cross you, brother. You're scary when you're methodical." "I'm an architect. I build things to last, and I tear them down the same way. Carefully, systematically, and completely." 3 months later, I was sitting in my office reviewing plans for a new project when my assistant knocked on the door. "There's someone here to see you," she said. "A woman named Becca Ellery." Becca looked different than she had during our coffee shop meeting. Healthier, more confident, like someone who'd been carrying a heavy weight and finally set it down. "I wanted to thank you," she said, taking a seat across from my desk, "and to give you an update on how everything turned out. I'm all ears. Grant's been ordered to pay alimony and child support that will keep him broke for the next decade. He had to move back in with his parents in New Hampshire. Last I heard, he was working at a computer repair shop for minimum wage. And Tessa? Still unemployed. Turns out having terminated for ethics violations on your employment record makes it hard to find work in healthcare. She's been applying for retail jobs. I almost feel sorry for her." "Almost?" "Almost. Then I remember that she made her choices, and choices have consequences." Becca smiled. "Speaking of consequences, I have some news that might interest you. Remember that nurse Jennifer I mentioned, the one I suspected Grant had an affair with before Tessa?" "What about her?" "She's filed a harassment lawsuit against the hospital. Apparently Grant used his position in IT to access her personal information and pressure her into a relationship. When she tried to end it, he made her work life so difficult that she had to quit. Interesting timing." "She saw the news about Grant's termination and decided to come forward. Her lawyer thinks they have a strong case." I leaned back in my chair, considering the implications. So Grant's pattern of behavior is finally catching up with him. All of it. The affairs, the abuse of power, the financial misconduct. He thought he was untouchable, but it turns out actions really do have consequences. After Becca left, I sat alone in my office as the sun set over Portland. Outside, the city was coming alive with evening traffic and the bustle of people heading home to their families. I thought about the past 6 months, about the marriage that had faded and the revenge that had consumed me. I thought about Tessa, probably sitting in some small apartment, wondering how her life had gone so wrong. I thought about Grant, humiliated and broke, paying the price for years of selfish choices. Most of all, I thought about the future, about the house I was designing for myself, a place where I could start over without the shadows of betrayal and lies. About the woman I'd met at a gallery opening last week, an art teacher with kind eyes and an honest smile. About the possibility that some structures, once demolished, could be rebuilt stronger than before. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from an unknown number. "I know what you did to Grant and Tessa. You think you're so smart, but you made enemies. Watch your back." I stared at the message for a moment, then deleted it. Let them come. I was an architect, and I'd learned something important over the past 6 months. When you build something properly, with a solid foundation and careful attention to detail, it can withstand any storm. I gathered up my drawings and headed home to my empty house, where I would spend the evening planning my next project. Not revenge this time, but something better, something like redemption.